I'm Debbie Shields. I'm a non-exec director with the Scottish Refugee Council, and I've been on boards for probably about 10 years. I don't think there's anything I didn't expect. I think what's happened recently is since I've moved to working with the Scottish Refugee Council, it's a much bigger organisation than I've been involved in before, and moving from those kind of smaller, kind of more local charities, I guess, moving to a national charity like that was a really big difference, and it kind of took me a while to get used to it, to be honest. I think I'm the kind of person that likes to be involved and feel that I'm doing something, and that's essentially why I joined boards in the first place. And I think being on a big board like that, where there's kind of 12 members and there's a huge remit, it's difficult to get involved in everything or be part of kind of every working group or every decision. So for me, those kind of work, I mean, it's great. I love being part of it, but it took me a while to make that adjustment. And being on subcommittees was actually a really good way of doing that. So I sit on the People subcommittee, and I think that's a real way for people to use their expertise and really get involved and make sure you're contributing what you want to contribute, because you're there mostly or partly at least for the skill set that you've got. So you want to make sure you're using that and the charity get the benefit. I think there's a number of reasons that people should volunteer and be trustees. And the main one for me, I think, is about charities having access to people with a real variety of skills and diverse backgrounds, with a diversity of thought. And a lot of charities don't have the budget to have that kind of access or have that kind of person on their staff team. So being on a board is a really great way of ensuring that charities have access to really different kinds of people, and people from different backgrounds as well. And people from different sectors. So people in the private sector, like myself, being on boards brings a really different way of thinking about what the organisation's there to achieve and the strategic development of that, and how that can plan. I always think the best board appointments come when there's a two-way street, when the trustee and the organisation both get something from it. And being on a board has been such a great development tool for me. And that wasn't a reason I joined the board in the first place. But it's definitely been something after almost 10 years of being on boards that, if I look back, has definitely been a real kind of vehicle for me to become a director in my day job as well and progress in that. It just gives people such an insight and a different way of working and a really kind of practical way of developing yourself. So I think that's something to remember about joining a board, is that, the charity needs to get a lot out of it, but you can get a lot out of it as well. And that's one of the most important things for me. I think sometimes people don't think they've got anything to give to join a board. And I hear that all the time through my day job here at Aspen. And we deal with a lot of really senior people. And it really surprises me sometimes that they haven't thought about joining boards, or maybe think it's not for them for whatever reason. And I think it's really important those two are probably the biggest two reasons, but there's so much you can get from being on a board. And I think actually the sense of satisfaction knowing that you're helping a charity kind of achieve its aims and objectives and working with the groups or the causes that they're there to work with, for me personally is really satisfying. Like I say, I've been involved in charities for a long time, and I'd been the chair of a board for about, I think, 4 or 5 years. And it was time for me to step down from that. So I was looking for another opportunity, and I knew that I wanted to move to a national charity, to a bigger charity. And with my day job working in recruitment, and it kind of all coincided with Ukraine and everything kind of happening there. And I was seeing people coming over from Ukraine who were really senior and looking for work, but actually not getting the right place in the job market. And to be honest, I thought it was actually a really bad state of affairs. We had some really, really skilled people, really interesting people who could have done really good jobs, but actually they're not getting the chance to work at the level they probably should be working at. And I'd kind of been speaking to people about what could we do in recruitment to make sure those people were getting a fair chance and kind of being able to be involved in the processes at least, and not being taken out at the first stage or even not getting the point to applying. And that got me really interested in the kind of refugee and asylum seeker space, and to be honest, embarrassed as a country about how we treated people coming and looking for asylum. And that's really how I got interested in that. And it just so happened that at the same time I was trying to have these chats with people, an advert came up for trustees at the Refugee Council. So a bit of timing, I think, which is always really important, but also having a real interest in that space. And that's something I think that's really important when people are looking at trustee roles, is that you give up a lot of your free time, a lot of your time and a lot of your attention to being on boards. And there's got to be a reason you're doing that, because I think, you don't really want to be going to a 3-hour board meeting on a rainy night in December, after a long day at work, and then going home in the snow and the rain, if there's not something you're really passionate about and you really want to be a part of. So I would really suggest to people that, whatever it is they want to be involved in, you don't have to have lived experience of it, but I think you need to have a real connection to that organisation's values and what they're trying to do. And that's certainly what I had with the Refugee Council. So I'm just really pleased that kind of all worked out, and that was maybe 2.5 years ago. And unfortunately, I think we're still in the same position with a lot of the refugee and asylum seeker stuff. But we're obviously working hard to try and change that. I think I wouldn't do the first trustee role that I had, actually. That was one that I kind of take up. And at the time I was really excited to be a trustee, but as I was kind of more and more involved in it, I just knew it wasn't for me, that it wasn't what I expected, but it also didn't feel like what I wanted to do. So I actually stepped away from that role after the almost first year. And that's a really good example, actually, of maybe not having that real connection to the organisation and the values. I was really excited to be a trustee, and I kind of, was keen to get involved. So I stepped out of that and quite quickly moved into something else, which I did love, and that was the organisation Say Women, who I was with for a long period of time, and I was chair there. And that, I think if I look back at that now, that organisation is completely different from when I started on the board. There's the chief exec's different, the whole board's different, the way it's run's different. And that was such a great learning experience, and it was tough at the start. It's a lot of work, a lot of time went into that organisation. But actually, even though it was quite demanding and tricky at the start, I don't think I would change anything, because I think all of those things that happened and all the things we worked through as a team together actually really stood me in really good stead for moving forward in my board career, and also general life. Actually, there was lots of really good lessons in that. So no, there's nothing I would change from that role at all, but the big lesson, as I've just said, is make sure you're in the right place. There's so much I've got personally from being a trustee. I think I like being involved in cause-driven organisations. My first job ever, my first proper job, was in the voluntary sector in a non-profit organisation. And I think once the third sector is kind of in your heart, it stays there. And yes, I've been working in private sector for a long time, but actually I've always worked with the third sector at Aspen for the last 6.5 years. That's been, the overwhelming majority of what I've done. So I've managed to kind of wangle my career to work with the third sector, and also work in manage board roles at the same time, which can be quite difficult to do with a full-time job, in life and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's actually a real privilege to be able to do that. Every single board we work with is completely different. Small organisations, massive organisations, in the education space, in the housing association space, public sector, voluntary sector, all of that stuff. You can look at two organisations from the outside and think they're quite similar, but their boards will probably be completely different every time. And it's really important that when we're looking to work with a board in any way, whether it's a board I'm on or a board that they were working with professionally, is that we need to look at the diversity of it and the makeup. And I think a lot of people think now that gender balance is fine on boards. It's not. It's not where it should be. The amount of female chairs we have are very small still in comparison. When I was the chair of a board, I was 40, and and I was considered a young female chair. A lot of people wouldn't think that was a young chair, but actually, in the space, there aren't many female chairs at 40 or anything about that. And I think for me, it's something we still need to be really mindful of. But it's not the only thing. Diversity on boards can mean so many different things. And I think where people come from and that diversity of thought and how people approach things is just as important as having, all kind of people with different backgrounds and stuff represented. And I think it can be forgotten about sometimes. For me, it's not a box ticking exercise. It's not have a look around our board and see how diverse we are. It's really, when you get into the heart of it, how diverse are we? Are we diverse or not? And really kind of paying attention to that and making sure that that's kind of really number one up there. And we're not thinking, oh, well, we need someone from this background because we don't have that and it shows we're not diverse. It's about, what does the organisation need? Are we representing the people that you're there to serve? Because that, at the end of the day, what your board's there to do. And make sure that the organisation's fit for purpose, safeguarding all the stuff you'd expect. But that diversity, I think, for me, is really, really powerful when you get a truly diverse board. I actually think, boards are transformational for organisations, and with the right people on there and the right attention paid and the right fit and everyone working together as a team is where the magic happens.